Woo indeed. Hello, world. What is up? Welcome to Build. I'm your host, Matt Forte. We are here live at the Build studio in New York City. Urban Youth is an organization born out of the highly successful Urban Youth Racing School. Established in Philadelphia in 1998, they aim to completely reverse the plight of urban youth in this country by creating opportunities, igniting careers, and transforming lives. Joining me now, Urban Youth co-founder Anthony Martin and filmmaker and co-executive producer on the upcoming Urban Youth Racing School docuseries, Jordan Walker Pearlman. Ladies and gentlemen, how about a round of applause for our guests? Come on, make some noise for Anthony and Jordan right now. Gentlemen, thank you so much for being here. Welcome to the show. How are you guys doing? How's life going right now?
Phenomenal.
Yeah,
what
phenomenal.
he said.
Yeah. You echo his sentiments. Phenomenal. I believe it, man. I was reading up 21 incredible years with the Urban Youth Racing School, with this organization. So many lives transformed, so much incredible work done. Take me back, if you don't mind, Anthony. I wanted to start kind of in the beginning of just back to 1998, back to that year one. What inspired you to start, of all things, a racing school?
Well, first of all, I'm actually from Southwest Philadelphia. And probably back in the 80s and the 90s, I was probably the only kid in the hood that was really a racing fan. Now, basically what it is, you know, when you really think about racing, kind of like in the hood, you think about drag racing. But I was really more of a circle track guy. And, you know, I was kind of like an athlete when I was growing up in high school and things like that. But I always liked racing. So in 1998, a partner of mine came up with this concept of introducing the racing industry to urban youth as a possible career option. Racing is a multi-billion-dollar industry, right? And I got news for you. You cannot be involved in a sport if one of two things don't happen. Either you need some type of relationship or you have to have a bunch of money. Right. So you can only imagine with a lot of urban inner city kids, they have neither. So we wanted to actually build this pipeline of introducing them to the sport where they could say, listen, you know what? You know, I don't have to be a driver one day. I can be an engineer. I can be a tire changer. I can be a chassis person and make $200,000 a year actually doing this, okay? And I got news for you. You can't do these, being a race car driver, you cannot be successful without having a successful team behind you. So the mechanics of it, the engineering and the science and technology of racing is probably more important than the actual driver. Because if I got a fast car and I have great mechanics, I could be not as good a driver as you, but because I got the better mechanics, right, I'm going to go faster than you. So all these things actually equate into the racing world. So in 1998, I was able to convince Michael Andretti of the Andretti family to come into West Philadelphia, bring his race car into West Philadelphia, and we actually ended up bringing like 300 kids out to actually see the car. And when Michael Andretti actually came, he was actually shocked to see all these urban inner city kids that actually had interest in the sport. They were like, wow. So then he talked about the fact that, yeah, I'm a driver. My dad, Mario Andretti, was one of the greatest drivers of all time. He was basically saying that, listen, you don't have to be the driver. You can be an engineer or mechanic and things like that. So from that, and we saw the response of the kids from that, that was the start of the Urban Youth Racing School. Right, so the following year, I met another gentleman by the name of Ed Renzi, who was the president and CEO of the McDonald's Corporation worldwide. He was just retiring as president of McDonald's. He had a racing team in the ARCA series in NASCAR. He liked my concept, and he actually funded us. And he actually understood diversity, and actually kind of understood the power of introducing and getting youth getting behind them and getting them involved in learning about this. So from there, I then met NASCAR and built a relationship from there, and it goes forward from there.
And at the risk of going too far back, why were you interested in it? What sparked your passion in racing to begin with? And this thing that, you're right, at that time, you didn't have a relationship, you don't have a ton of money, so you can't really aspire to become a part of it. What kept your passion alive? Why were you so into racing?
I thought racing was sexy.
That's it.
I mean, no. Honestly, you know, being a race car. Let me give you an example. Will Smith, right? Yeah. Will Smith is in the Formula One, right? He talked about the fact that when he was a kid growing up in West Philly, one of his dreams was to be a race car driver. Yeah. He probably looked at it the same way I looked at it, as being a sexy sport. Yeah. So for me, that's kind of like how I actually looked at it, and I realized that again, that being a race car driver is not the end all, beginning all and end all. You have to have that strong team around you. Right. So it's a team sport, basically. So because of that, I actually liked it.
And that's something you hear a lot of, too, because I think more than most sports, yeah, with racing, you tend to glorify and see the one person holding the trophy at the end of the race, but it is a huge team that gets them there, and there's so many different elements and different expertise involved in that world. This program, Urban Youth Racing School, is to this day, I believe it's the only kind of its kind in the world. And how far in, how many years in did you guys know that you had something that was working, that you were making moves, that you were doing some good work for these kids? When did you know that it was effective?
Probably in the mid 2000s. It took a minute for sure, but what we was learning is the fact that a lot of the kids who were actually coming into the school, being introduced, because let me say this to you, the program is free. So just imagine an inner city kid coming into the program. If he had to pay for that, if he or she had to pay for that, you're talking about thousands of dollars. So our program is free, and our program is paid for by Chevrolet and General Motors. They've been our partner for 19 years. So this has been a phenomenal relationship with those guys over there. So them actually coming in, we actually found that once they got involved in it, and obviously everybody wants to drive go-karts and race and things like that.
That's how the kids are like, oh, we're going to drive go-karts and race. Well, that's how you get them.
That's the carrot we dangle at the end of the day, right? Exactly. But, in order for you to be able to do that for 5 Saturdays, here's what you have to do. Yeah. So they learn about engines, how engine actually operates. They learn about an apex. The apex. An apex is the center part of a turn, right? Yeah. Well, they learn about apexes in geometry class. So we started making driving terms become relevant to their schoolwork. Yeah. So now a kid doesn't say, well, wait a minute, well, why would I ever use physics? What would I ever use physics for or chemistry for? Well, guess what? If you actually implement it into this, you can be very successful at it. Yeah. So in actually doing that, we started finding that there were kids that were really talented at doing this, that kids actually can learn math and science. And the thing that was, I guess, most important was the fact that they started believing in themselves. Right. Because if you taught the kids mainly from the inner city about, being an engineer or a scientist, they start running for the hills. They think it's, like, I can never do that. Yeah. But you can do that. And when you have something in common with this, you can make it happen. So we found that to be very successful for us. So kids can actually learn about this, learning about the technology of it, the aerodynamics of it, and things of that nature. It's like, wow. Then they actually started implementing to their schoolwork, and understanding why math and science actually connects to it. That's how we've been successful with.
And that's kind of the brilliance of the program, because I think back to when I was in school, and like one of the most frustrating things when we had math was it was all taught in the abstract.
Right.
Whereas you guys are taking everything and you're grounding it in reality, and you're grounding it in something that's sexy and racing.
That's right.
And it's really cool. So it's kind of like this perfect storm. STEM education has always been important, but I think an emphasis has been placed on it, and a lot of talk around STEM education as technology has improved and grown and evolved. Have you guys had to evolve the curriculum, and you had to change your approach to stay relevant, to keep the kids interested, make sure they're learning what they need to be learning?
Absolutely. Yeah. And it's funny, we laugh about it because we said we've been teaching STEM for 21 years.
Yeah.
So
started talking about it.
Exactly, because I was like, wait a minute, you talking about STEM. We was doing this, 19 years ago. We were doing STEM. But yeah, so we definitely had to make changes. Like, for example, we did a program with the United States Navy, where the Office of Naval Research, ONR, they came to us and said, hey, listen, you guys are teaching these kids about engines. Can we transfer that knowledge of learning about a regular engine to learning about naval propulsion? So learning about nuclear-powered engines, learning about gas turbine, diesel engines, things like that, these engines that power submarines and battleships. So in doing that protocol, we found it to be very, very successful. And the Navy admirals that were actually coming in who made this happen were absolutely blown away. Like, blown away by this. In fact, we actually had one of our kids make a pitch to the Pentagon, because there was a ship that was actually, I can't think of the name, it was a ship that they were building back in the 1990s, but they ended up scrapping that, and they ended up building this submarine, this ballistic submarine instead of that. But that particular project, the reason why they didn't do that project was it cost too much money to do it. So our kids took that on as a project. But they actually came in, looked at the ship, started working on it, coming up with different ideas, and that was presented to the Pentagon. So the admirals, in fact, the head admiral, chief of naval operations, came to the school and everything, and he was absolutely just blown away by what these kids were learning, the fact that these kids can actually do this.
Yeah.
You know, think about it for a second. You have 13, 14-year-old kids knowing about a nuclear engine, how it operates, and things of that nature. So that stuff is very, very powerful.
Yeah, it's incredibly powerful. Jordan, when did you become aware of the Urban Youth Racing School and all the amazing work that Anthony and his people were doing? How'd you become involved as a producer on this project?
It's funny thinking about it, because I think in my heart, it was years ago, but the reality is it was about 13 months ago. Sometimes somebody or an organization comes into your life and you feel like they've always been there. That's how I feel about Urban Youth Racing School. A frequent collaborator of mine, the trumpet player Wallace Roney, is from Philadelphia, and he worked on me on a number of my films. And his sister, Crystal, is a close friend of mine, and she called me and said, I have to tell you about my cousin Anthony's school. And she told me about it, and I thought a lot about the kids I grew up with, that I wish there was something like that for them. And then I thought, you know, this would be a great TV show. Let's let their voices be heard. Let's tell this story. We're storytellers. And that's how I got involved.
At the end of the day, right? Just telling stories. Where do you start with such an incredible story, with such a rich history? 21 years of doing this amazing work. When you guys met with Anthony, and have you figured that out yet in the scope of planning the show? What stories you want to tell, focusing on the children, focusing on the history of the school? How deep into the process are you at this point?
We're deep into the process in terms of the question you asked, which is the idea is to make this very much giving kids their voices, letting the stories be their stories, and then involving the extra stories that come around that. Now, what's interesting, and which Anthony and I talked about from the very beginning, is to also involve the history of motorsports, particularly African Americans in motorsports, which is another untold story that dates back, what would you say, Anthony, to the dawn of motorsports, or at least the late teens?
1924. 1924.
Wow.
And that would be it. But the focus has to be on the kids and to their voices and their stories. And that's when we then partnered up with Will Smith's company, Overbrook, and we're doing the show together. And that's something we've said from the very beginning.
I was going to say, how did Will Smith get into the fold? Because I saw a couple of stories that his Overbrook is now involved, and they're working on the project. I mean, he's from Philly. It makes sense. Just how does something like that get
It does make sense, but the funny thing is, I said to the people at my production company, said, oh, you know, Will Smith is involved with Formula One, and he's from Philadelphia. Let's call him and see if they want to get involved with us. And I said, 'cause I'm not that intelligent, I said, oh, he's from Philly. Of course he knows about the school. So I called him and Caleb Pinkett up. It's his, who runs his company and is also his brother-in-law. And I said, I'm sure you guys know about this school, this magnificent school in Philadelphia. And they said, what school? He had no idea, had never heard of it. It's good for me, because if he had, I'm sure he would have gotten the rights and done the show 10 years ago. But I was really shocked that he hadn't. But he couldn't have been more enthusiastic. It happened within a week. All of Overbrook came on board. They're all passionate about this, because we all have memories of friends, and we say whatever part of life we enter in, and we start to remember friends that are not with us anymore. And we say, if they had an outlet, if they had a voice, if they had an opportunity, why did I get the lucky break? And I think we're passionate about doing this show and about this school, because it's a way to make sure that more and more kids have the same breaks.
Well, I have to imagine, like, as a storyteller, you're in an enviable, and I'm jealous of you because of the no shortage of incredible stories that there are to tell. I was reading some yesterday. I just met another amazing young man who his story and just the journey he's been on and the companies he's worked for already and what he's done. You know, do you keep touch with a lot of the kids? You know, 21 years, that's a lot of people. Are there stories that stand out for you, Anthony, that you think about when times are challenging or whatever, and you go, you know what, I got to keep going because this is what we're doing. You know, what are some of those moments that stand out for you?
I mean, there's so many, to be honest with you. You know, so many our students that are just doing great things right now. In fact, you spoke to Jeremy earlier, Yeah, exactly,
met him, yeah.
exactly. Who's becoming a very successful rapper, performer, as well as artist. One of the things I think the school does is it gives these kids the ability to think outside of the box. As we say, we call it critical thinking. And for example, like one of our students also, she graduated from Stanford University, and she actually owns a company now called Serum. And Serum is actually a pharmaceutical company where they basically take overruns of medications from the pharmaceutical companies, because usually when they have overruns, they get rid of them. Well, she put together this program where they actually send these particular overruns of medication to her organization, and then they distribute them to the less fortunate. Right, and she was actually in Forbes magazine. I mean, one of our kids worked for President Obama a few years ago. One of our students actually works for NBC. So to answer your question specifically, most of the students I stay in contact. They basically reach out to me. They come back and give back. That's one of the things that I really preach. Like, if you're gonna be part of this program, remember this program is free. If you had to pay for this, it's cost you thousands of dollars to be a part of this. So one of the things I preach and talk about is the fact that you got to come back, you got to give back. Your success could be someone else's success. One of the things we talk about all the time, which I feel is very, very important, when you really think about it, is we're changing generations. We're not just changing lives, we're changing generations. One of our kids, his name is Danny Cologne, he was the first kid in his family to graduate from college, right? And so he graduated from college, and now he works for NBC, okay? So think about it. So now his kids will now have that following of going to college and becoming successful too. Yeah. But this kid's story is unbelievable. When he was in high school, his parents kind of left town, and you know who Joe Gibbs is? Yeah. The coach?
Yeah, Coach Joe.
Did you know that Joe Gibbs paid for an apartment for this kid for a year?
Really?
Yes. Joe Gibbs would never tell that story. But when this kid was in high school, he did an internship with Joe Gibbs down in North Carolina with his race team. And when he was down there, his parents ended up leaving. So he ended up calling me crying, going crazy, like, what am I going to do? Where am I going to go? So when he came back up to Philadelphia, he stayed with me, my family, for a couple of weeks. We told Joe Gibbs and them the story. Joe Gibbs started sending money to the racing school to get this kid an apartment to stay at. Yeah. These are the type of stories I'm talking about that you would never, ever know. So now he's very successful, this kid. Yeah. And he will tell you the racing school saved his life because this kid, he didn't know anything about racing, period. And a lot of the students that come in, they don't know the first thing about racing. Right. They want to drive go-karts and have fun, but they don't know anything about racing. When they leave, they know all about it. Inside and out. You know, right.
As a young man who thought racing was sexy, and that was why this all kind of appealed and started to you, you know, did you ever envision yourself as the man who was going to be the one taking people in and helping them find their dream? Like, is this you thought you would be a racer at one point, mm-hmm. and now here you are doing this incredible work. Do you ever reflect on that, reconcile that, think back to that young man who just thought cars were sexy, and now here you are doing this? What would you say to that young man, you know?
I never thought I'd be doing what I'm doing. Yeah. That's just being 100% honest with you. I never thought that for sure. But let me tell you, real fast, my background is sports marketing. I used to work for Charles Barkley. And I was the guy, I know, and the crowd is probably too young to remember this, but in the early 1990s, Randall Cunningham, who played quarterback for the Philadelphia Eagles, he used to wear a product that I designed. I designed these shoelaces that he wore on the football field. And if you look at a lot of people's shoes today, that was my idea, those laces and everything. So my background was sports marketing. I worked for other athletes I'm not going to mention here, but I did that. And, you know, again, in the back of my mind, I was always a racing fan. But for me, I thought I was going to be in the sports marketing business forever.
That was where you were going to be?
To be honest with you, I thought I was going to be in the sports marketing business forever. But when I had the opportunity to really think about, you know, about racing and the fact that I was kind of like a closet racing fan, because it wasn't like I had folks I can talk to in the hood about racing. They didn't really follow racing like that. So I was kind of like a class racing. But but one of my close friends of mine, he was a big racing fan too. So that's how we ended up coming together and say, hey, you know what? Let's actually try to do a program where we can actually introduce youth to this particular industry. And that's kind of how that was actually born. But what we found was we actually came in at the perfect time, because at that time, NASCAR and a lot of the racing organizations are looking to diversify, and still even today. Like, when you really think about it, there's only really one successful black driver today in racing, and that's Lewis Hamilton in F1, and that's not even really American. That's really more European, to be honest with you. You have another guy who's African-American, this guy Bubba Wallace, who races in the NASCAR series, but he's not doing very well in the series. So it's not like it's a big deal. So when you really think about the urban community, they don't see us out. They don't see African-Americans driving out there. So this is a sport that's kind of eluded them, and it's a sport where they look at it as like, well, you know what? I could never afford to do that or be a part of that. So we feel like we've changed that, and we're continuing to change that, and it's a challenge. Yeah. And it's still a challenge in 2019, 2020, to be honest with you. But we're working at it. We're trying to make it happen. But to answer your question, I never, ever thought I would be doing this, and I think that seeing the progress of over 21 year span, and having over 6,000 kids go through the program, and 90% of them being very successful, has kept me going. Yeah. It drives me. It's more about, listen, if I was trying to make money, I'd be in a sports management business. Right. I wouldn't be in this business, to be honest with you. But yeah, so for me, so now that we've, and seeing the kids be successful and have kids call me up, listen, Anthony, I just graduated from this college. I just graduated from Tuskegee or wherever it might be. That's the most powerful piece for me.
Shaping generations, man. It's like
absolutely changing generations. Absolutely
changing them. We're gonna go over to audience Q&A in just a second. And Jordan, I know you guys are in the early stages. Do you have a timeline of when we hope to see some footage, some finished product? Like, what's your internally? When do you want to be done by? When do you want to have this out there?
I'd say spring.
Spring
of 2020, and then we're going to do the first season in Philadelphia, and we're going to do the second season in South Africa. And we're negotiating now to build an urban youth racing school in South Africa. Incredible. So I'd like to think that we'll get that done in 2021, which means getting the first season of this show shot in early 2020 and out there in the summer.
It's incredibly exciting. How do people that are watching right now that want to support, that want to help, where do they go?
So they can go to our website at www.uyrs.com. That's UYRS.com, right? UYRS. And one of the things I want to mention, too, real fast, is the fact that we partner with racing teams, too, which is very, very important. And one of those teams is New York Racing. A guy by the name of John Cohen owns that team, and we partner with him. So a lot of our kids now have this pipeline that we're actually building between the programs and these racing teams. And we also are going to be announcing a big deal next week. We get ready to partner with the Simeon Foundation Race Museum in Philadelphia, which is ranked the number one automotive museum in the world. He's number one in the world.
You did just announce it, by the way.
I was going to say, you just announced it. We're live.
Well, we're gonna have a press conference.
But I'm gonna just for the record, when I talk about it later, I'm counting that as exclusive. I've got that. That's mine. Now.
Right. Exactly.
Put an embargo on it now.
Right. Exactly. So, but
That's incredible.
So it's incredible.
Wow.
His automobiles are worth $500 million. He has the greatest collection of automobiles in the world, and he was just ranked number one in the world. And Ralph Lauren and Jay Leno and all these folks visit his place annually.
Well, congratulations on 21 years, man, and the next 20, 21, and then some. It's just unbelievable the stuff you guys are doing. We're not done yet. We've got at least two, right? I got two questions in the room. We've got microphones out there. Let's hit them up. The first one all the way in the back. Go for it.
Hi, guys.
Hey.
I was just wondering, with such an interesting subject matter, what some of the best moments of filming the show have been and what some challenges have been.
We haven't started filming the show yet.
Oh, got it.
So
big challenge.
I can tell you what I think. We start in the spring probably. I can tell you what I think the most challenging will be is that, just as you said, there are going to be so many compelling stories, and it's going to be very hard to decide which stories get featured and which don't, which is why my hope is that there'll be a lot of extra material that then we can, like I said, voices to not normally heard or heard enough voices.
Thank you for your question. I got one more. Come on down.
Hi, this is a question from our website, buildseries.com. Because you're inspiring so many young people, who was your inspiration when you were growing up?
Excellent question. My inspiration growing up, to be honest with you, was Muhammad Ali. I always loved Muhammad Ali. He inspired me to want to be in the sports marketing business and do what I actually do. But yes, he would be my inspiration.
Jordan, who was your inspiration growing up, man?
Growing up,
Yeah.
my grandmother.
Yeah.
Yes, because she taught me grit and she inspired me to get up in the morning when I otherwise wouldn't. But in every way, she inspired me. She was my inspiration.
Awesome. Well, both of you gentlemen are very inspiring. Anthony, the work you've done is incredible, man,
Thank you.
and it's
Thank
so
you.
amazing. It's so awesome to have you here. I'll remind everybody, uyrs.com is where you want to go to support this incredible cause and get involved. You know what? While we're at it, the young man, he's a musician. Where can we hear his music? Get a plug in. The gentleman I was talking to earlier.
Yeah,
Where can I hear your music, man? Art from the Heart. It's on Spotify. It's on Apple Music. Check it out, Art from the Heart. Everybody, thank you so much. Do me a favor. You were a great audience. Keep it going. Make an amazing amount of noise. And thank Anthony Martin and Jordan Walker Pearlman for being here. Thank you, gentlemen.
Thank you.